Hello, everybody. I'm Simona from Startup Lithuania, and I'm very happy to be back after the summer with our online sessions of Startup Fair 2020. So today we are going to have two experts from the USA. Hello, Emma, and hello, Armen.
Great to be here, Simona.
Hello, Simona. Hello, everyone.
So you're both founders of the Accelerator. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Most certainly. So the BAJ Accelerator, we have launched and welcomed stellar founders. And indeed, in the name, the B stands for the Baltic states, A stands for Armenia, and J stands for our academic partner, the Jacobs Technion Cornell Institute. So with this, we're most delighted to support founders as they bring together, with our support, tour de force, fundraising rounds, growth in sales, and development as a team.
Do you have any specific industries you're looking for, or how can I apply for that if I'm a startup?
Emma, why don't you take the gang through our investment thesis and this point in particular?
Wonderful. Thank you, Armen. Thank you, Simona. Everyone, we are delighted to mention that our accelerator is focused and our thesis is in deep tech, in healthcare, and computer vision, and the SaaS applications, enterprise SaaS applications. We are accepting all stages from seed to Series A plus. We are looking for startups with strong CEOs understanding the market fit of their product. The applications are available 3 times a year. That's in January, May, and September. Hence, September applications are right now open until September 15. And you can find it in your Zoom group chat that Armen has shared with all of you, www.bajaccelerator.com. In there, you can go our program and just explore that tab specifically to see how you can apply, what is the program about.
Thank you both. We're going to share those links in the comment section. And without anything else, I would like to start with your presentations. And I would like to start with your man. And you are going to share more about storytelling, right?
Absolutely. And
okay. So wonderful. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. And most delighted to be here, Simona. Very much appreciate the invitation upon the organization. And so today we'll be discussing storytelling, a critical skill for startups, a critical skill for even entrepreneurs, individuals looking to make a change at large organizations. And importantly, storytelling cuts across team hiring, fundraising, and acquiring customers. And an important identity I would recommend you consider is that of a rainmaker. A rainmaker in traditional use is a key member of indigenous tribes, an individual who is charged with, who is relied upon to bring the rain. Enables agriculture, it enables sustenance. And there's a few qualities about the rainmaker that is highly pertinent to startup founders. The origin story involves a link between the group's past, present, and future. The rainmaker also has an extraordinary amount of grit and resilience. And thirdly, the rainmaker takes their responsibility very seriously, that they must focus on requesting, working on, and enabling the rain to come. And indeed, in the world of startups, this role, this persona, this type of identity is highly pertinent because, as the statistics show, those startups do fail. And for all the slews of reasons that can be, one of which that's near the top is not having sufficient resources. By extension, not using existing resources effectively, whether that's capital put in by the founders, early sales traction that's not able to be accelerated, insufficient funds. And this goes with the adage that not everyone is in the sales function, but everyone should be in sales. Sales used in the sense of whatever the vision you have with your startup, whatever stake, whatever claim you have to make the world a better place, to transform a process, to remake a new market area, to unleash a new technology, it really comes down at first to your story. Then your story becomes manifest in your product. It comes manifest in terms of your case studies. And it comes manifest that with some of the well-known brands around the world, it becomes part of language, the way we move about city streets, the idea of staying in another person's home in contrast to a hotel, the way we search for information on the internet as a set of examples. So with this, and by design, the storyteller having the frame of reference as a rainmaker is critical. And during our time here, we're going to convey some structure. Myself, as a scientist, investor, and co-founder of an accelerator, I've seen many times how stories have landed and made a difference, whether that's for a team of 10 to that of teams of 10,000. And it really comes down to this skill. So I'll look to leave you with a few techniques, a few things you can practice with, and underscoring this purpose of this craft of storytelling that'll enable your technology to be successful out in the market. First, let's start with structure. Now, we all have seen films. Film is a type of story. A book is a type of story. A news article is type of story. A family story. We hear stories all the time. But what's the most pertinent one for a startup? Well, I'll highlight a structure that you'll likely find useful. It actually lends from the world of cinema. So, firstly, in a film, you'll need some sort of hook. This applies to public speaking. It applies to an opening scene in a movie. Something that highlights this point that you must realize that you don't immediately have the attention of your audience. How do you generate intrigue? What is your hook? Your prompting question? What is your point that you are passionate about, that you seek your listeners to be passionate about too? When we discuss a technique around rapport, often that can be an important hook. Some common context between you and the listener. It indeed requires some research. And so after the hook, the next three in sequence is the pledge, the turn, and the prestige. You may recognize this structure being used actually in the film titled as such, The Prestige, where you have warring magicians. So if you consider even the most basic of childhood entertainment, you have a ball. And the idea here is that you pledge that this is a normal ball. And everyone looks, it looks normal. And then something happens. The ball disappears. And the audience wonders, well, where did it go? Then it must return. Something must happen. And this is the prestige. The ball returns. Okay, so let's map this to startups. The pledge is the as is. The world as it is today, the world as it is before your startup, the world as it is before you and your co-founders, your early team have decided to embark on an adventure to make the world better, to transform something. And this takes some subtlety. Let's take, for example, ride sharing. It took years for ride sharing to emerge. You can't immediately just beat your customers over the head and say, should we just have hunks of metal, tons of metal hurtling down the street with people waving their hands, perhaps holding their children by the hand? Is that safe? Is that reasonable? What about the edge cases in terms of getting to an airport or getting to go see something critical for business or your personal life? The point I want to highlight here is that the pledge is your articulation of the as is state. And it must be done in a way that subtly resonates with your listeners, so much so that they will react to your call to action. We'll get to that in a moment. After the pledge is the turn. So the turn is an invitation, and it is a sudden change. It is a sudden change on what your startup means for the world, what you can enable that is different. And this often comes to the point of the value propositions you have. Can you enable something to happen faster? Can you enable something to happen safer? Can you enable something to happen at a better price? Can you unlock new experiences? If we take the rideshare example, it's individuals would have access to chauffeur experience in higher quality vehicles that they would not have before, and even more conveniently than the standard chauffeur requests of making a phone call, scheduling a ride beforehand. It can be done with a click of a button, or even a click on your smartwatch, even with geolocation. Then it's the last step is the prestige, where you assert to investors, you assert to teammates that the world is not going back. This is not a one-off trick. Your business is sustainable. Your story has just begun. And then the last step is the action, the call to action. It could be a request to engage with an LOI, a letter of intent for business. It could be the initiation of a pilot study. It could be a contract. It could be a hiring of a new employee. It could be garnering of a partner. And so if we take this structure from hook to pledge to turn to prestige to ask, you have the framework for a story. And indeed, you could iterate through this structure in a 45-second elevator or lift ride, or if you have an hour to pitch for a critical presentation for your company. So let's go through this by an example. And we'll take an example through the world of drug safety. And I'll map the different parts as we proceed. So in the world today, there is a field known as pharmacovigilance. And I remember very distinctively in my graduate training, I would leave my apartment and I would head toward campus, specifically the tri-institutional area in New York City, with powerhouses such as Weill Cornell, Rockefeller University, and the hospital of Memorial Sloan Kettering. As I would pass Sloan Kettering, I would be startled in that I would see protesters there in front of the hospital. And I thought to myself, there as a young researcher, why would people be protesting in front of a hospital? Is there something with construction? Was there an item with malpractice? What was going on? So I asked the protesters, what are you here so passionate about in front of this hospital? And they said, we want the medicine access sooner. And this point, this jarring point, brought to mind a whole slew of imagery. The advertisements for medicine, the pill boxes that will have instructions around adverse reactions. And it became very clear that I was witnessing something that involved a ratio, the ratio of risk and benefit. So let's take a set of examples. If you take paracetamol, some medicine to reduce your fever, the benefit is small, and the risk is also small. You might have a stomach ache, something relatively mild. But if you were talking about a last line cancer drug that a cancer center would use, well, the risk is high. There could be death, but the benefit is potentially also high because it could be life-saving. Now, the ratio for the basic drug and the last line drug, the numerator and denominator are different, but the ratio must hold, and that the drug must be safe. So what I saw here in front of this hospital was a debate on this ratio. Namely, was there sufficient evidence that this drug was safe and could be distributed to those last line patients? And indeed, governments, industry struggle to certify drugs. Indeed, mistakes have been made in the past. And indeed, just waiting until there is a mountain of data leads to lives lost. So here we are, and this portion that we've just described, I will step out of frame of the story, is the hook. There is this ratio I'm attempting to convey to you. There is this startling scene I am conveying to you in terms of a protest in a hospital. And now we're going to go into the pledge, the as is. We'll step back into the frame of the story. So in this area of pharmacovigilance, risk and benefit needs to be handled, needs to be managed. If you look at the data, well, the data is very heterogeneous. If you or your loved one takes a medicine and there's an unexpected adverse reaction, you have a few options. One is you do nothing. And indeed, for every reported adverse reaction, there's 10 that's not reported. You can just suffer, you could just suffer through the severe stomach ache or fever and maybe not attribute it to the medicine. 2, you could write your physician. You could, and what's increasingly done is people are using social media to talk about brands they're having experience with, from consumer brands to pharmaceutical brands. You could make a phone call. There's a whole slew of unstructured data that's collected in a contact center and a call center. You could fill out web forms. Physicians, depending on the country, could use antiquated technologies such as fax machines, all sorts of data inputs. Increasingly advanced items might be caught in a blockchain. There's the EHR data, the electronic health record, that require pools. And this is the world as it is today, where you have regulators, because it's not possible to go faster than 2 weeks. You have this processing of the data, mostly manual, going through. I'll again step out of frame of the story. In this example, now we've just covered the pledge. We've poked around the as is, and the intention here is to bring up some agitation, to bring up some highlights that, hey, the as is actually not so good. Can we do anything better? Now let's proceed to the turn. If we consider around the world the millions of adverse reaction data that's coming in, what you have is basically a team of drug safety analysts, public health workers that are going through unsorted queues. So if you could imagine all of us on the line today, folks watching recordings thereafter, every single one of us were on the same team. And we were working in this fashion, first in, first out. So I'll give an analogy here. Our emails. So every morning, we by and large muddle through our emails. Sometimes we have some supportive priority features like priority inbox. We have spam filters. It helps a bit, most certainly. If there's a dear colleague, we might scan who the email is sent from. If there is the word urgent at top, we might read that first. But by and large, and because we are reading on the order of 10, 50, 200, sometimes 1,000, depending on your line of work, emails a day, we kind of make it through our emails. But let's consider many of our industrial processes: drug safety, anti-money laundering, enabling resilience in the supply chains. Most of our industry essentially acts as an unsorted email inbox. Drug safety comes in, case comes in, another one comes in, it's first in, first out, a human picks it up. Well, could that be better? Certainly in email, we have a priority inbox and different things. And indeed, what's most exciting with many startups today is we're having entire businesses built on this principle, using algorithms to sort the important work. And so if we consider drug safety, all of us working as a team by example, or the 50,000 plus drug safety analysts around the world, can we get them to work on society's behalf as per their expertise, looking at the most important reports first? And indeed, this involves natural language processing, computer vision, brought up into a machine learning layer to find patterns in the data that will highlight things when an adverse reaction is severe and not expected. This would be the equivalent of an urgent or a high priority email in your inbox, one that should be brought to the top. So with this idea, with mobilizing a team, we approach leading American, European, Asian pharmaceutical companies to convey that this idea that we can use algorithms to sort the work. And here we have a key part of the turn. Some resistance in that, well, perhaps the regulatory bodies will not agree to this new way of doing things. And this is critical as we loop back a bit to the pledge. I highlighted earlier that the status quo is 2 weeks. We had an assertion it could be done in less than a day to clear these backlogs in terms of the priority cases. And so this gets to the point of telling your story in context. We visited the regulators. In a very similar way that I am addressing you today, we unpacked this story that with algorithms, and an algorithm is nothing more than a sequence of steps that can be done programmatically. But what's exciting now is we have algorithms that can learn, enabling fantastic use cases from driverless cars to drug safety prioritization to many of the things you are working on as founders. And so telling our story to the regulators, we're able to loop back with the customers and not only convey that this is the world as it could be, but this is the world as it will be. And so we land on the prestige. So I'm most delighted to report that in this way, over a quarter of the world's drug safety information is prioritized with these improvements. Certainly there is more road to cover, but the point I want to underscore is that it takes a team to initiate on such a journey, and that will make the difference of a capability coming to the world sooner rather than later, sometimes even a decade sooner for the planet. So here we have on the ask. The ask here I'll tie directly to our session today. The ask in this drug safety example involved getting regulators and pharma teams to move, to hiring elite individuals, to inspiring people, to financing the initiative. The ask here is that you practice such storytelling. So with this, I'll review the structure. You have the hook. You have critically thereafter the pledge, the turn, the prestige, and the ask. And I would encourage you to practice your initiative story with an elaborated structure, and then one you can tell in 1 minute, sort of the log line or synopsis of a film. So with drug safety is we seek to empower drug safety analysts to work on the priority cases to save lives and improve public health. The how, of course, is with algorithms and the diligence and conviction and belief of the team. So with that, very much appreciate addressing the group today. Simona, if we have any questions, would entertain them. Otherwise, I will defer a few extra minutes to my dear colleague, Emma Arakelyan, after here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Armen. There are no questions for now, but if you have any questions, you can send those to me after the live session, and I will transfer them to Armen, and he can probably answer them after, right?
I welcome interaction with this community. A pleasure to be here, Simona.
Thank you, Armen, and thank you for showing that startups need starting. If they want to grow, they need to use storytelling, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. And for the next presentation, I would like to welcome Emma, who is going to share how to protect and monetize your product and business ideas, right? Emma, we cannot hear you.
Yes, Simona, thank you so much. Armen, as always, a phenomenal way of summarizing everything into 1 minute. And then I'll try to summarize a very complex topic just in 25 minutes. It is about protecting, monetizing your innovation and your product. We're going to talk through like a storyline, innovation trends. So we'll start with what are the trends and exponential technologies to give you a perspective. What is the buzzword in the US market and globally about the technologies? It's not anymore emerging, it's exponential. Innovation patentability requirements in the US. And we now protecting innovation and product. What are the laws? And you will be amazed that these laws actually go back to 100 or 200 years. So nothing new. It's just we need to protect it now in this new technology, fast-growing exponential technologies environment. And of course, why would you protect your innovation not only for the paper or for the legal purpose? For by all means, we are doing it to monetize your IP. And there are some emerging way of doing it, but there is a patent as a revenue source, licensing, acquiring, and of course the royalty structures that it will be great as US startups to be aware of. So let's go through this agenda. Let's briefly go over the innovation trends and exponential technologies. As I mentioned, innovation journey, like I'm showing you like in a one slide, 200 years of innovation, highlights on the phone, telephone that was invented, the television, the personal computers, and of course the internet, the Apple iPhone, and now we're going into VR and wearables and chatbots. So this is the one page of the 200 years of innovation in the driven by technology. And if we come here, where are we heading? These are the new way of combining, converging all these technologies together in a virtual reality. You probably, some of you startups are in one or two areas in this on this page. Machine learning puts everything into it, the IoT and the AR, VR. So we're all learning how to use the machine power. And of course, the voice and facial recognition is something very present in our current environment. And those are the innovation trends that actually take you through the journey, how to get to the society, how to make an impact using all these new technologies. The exponential technology is something that you probably know but by themselves, like synthetic biology, sensors and networks, robotics, blockchain. Those are now grouped into technologies calling exponential. Why? Because once the data is digitized, it goes through a very fast exponential growth journey. And now we have not only tools that you use for yourself, their organizations are also using tools that we call them exponential tools. You all probably heard about crowdfunding and crowdsourcing. So those all together as technologies and exponential tools in the environment, those together will take you through that much faster growth. And if you're not part of it, then you are actually not as competitive as others. So the new trend right now in the exponential technologies is converging, which means only 3D printing by itself is great, but then it will not actually bring the impact. So how do you combine the blockchain with 3D printing, with the artificial intelligence? How do robotics come into these sensors and networks and infinite computing? So the converging exponential technologies together are creating a new trend. And of course, the crowdfunding and crowdsourcing makes it even faster. The reach becomes even more powerful. It becomes global, almost overnight. So now knowing that how fast the environment is growing, all these new trends that are there, what it takes to protect your IP, and why would you do that? So in the US, there is an IP protection and acquisition laws and regulations and processes. Vast majority, big number of lawyers actually taking care of this business in the US and elsewhere. So IP protection is comprised of patent, trademark, and copyright. And then we'll go through, once you have it, once you protected it, how do you go by doing acquisition, licensing it to the world, and how you structure the royalties. So the patenting has very specific structure in the US. The patent law, US patent law, as you may heard of, it actually requires 4 distinct qualifications to be patentable. It has to be statutory. The idea has to be new. There has some usefulness to show, and it cannot be just obvious. It has to be non-obvious idea that you actually presented. So with that, it becomes an application, and you cannot just come and patent the idea. You have to show all the above, which is the usefulness, it's not obvious, and it's statutory. You must also show that it works. So there is some concept that you put together, there is some testing you put in place, and then of course, it cannot be available in the media. It cannot be even put in an article prior to the patent. If in case you have done some marketing or had written something about it, you have actually 9 months to 12 months, depending on the state, to be able to actually say, this is the first time I spoke about it, and within 9 to 12 months, you'll be able to actually submit your application. So remember those four qualifications or requirements. Again, statutory, it has to be new, usefulness, and it cannot be obvious. It has to have non-obvious structured description. 2 ways of applying for the patent in the US. It's the regular patent, which was the RPA, what the lawyers will refer to it, and the PPA, which is the provisional. Provisional is much cheaper to apply, and also takes much shorter time to get the approval. The RPA is the one that may take from 6 months to 5 years, depending on the product and the industry. And the PPA actually is something you can do yourself if you're a good writer. If not, hire somebody to do that, or have some team member who is very qualified to do that. It's actually a description of your idea, which gives you 12 months. It's just within a year, you can then apply for the patent application, the RPA, which requires a lot more resources and a much deeper involvement of the legal system and lawyers. But definitely for startups, we recommend to start with PPA, have some patent protection, which we call provisional. You can read more about it, but pay attention to the provisional, because that's probably the perfect first step for you to somehow protect before you come in front of the investors and in front of the clients. Let's move on to trademark. Trademark, actually in 1946, it was a great day for a lot of people who have ideas that they can put under trademark owners' rights. So this is actually very recent. With this law, it establishes your product in the marketplace. You have presence, and as a matter of fact, once you establish that presence, then you can then entertain or exercise your licensing and actually make money. The trademark owners preserve their goodwill in the mark, which means if somebody will try to use your trademark, because it's trademarked, you will be able to actually go and exercise the royalties or licenses. So this is a revenue generating opportunity for startups. So before you just jump in, do you need to patent? Think about, is it something you can trademark? Because this is a much faster process, but you have to do it. If we go to licensing perspective, as I mentioned, it is about logo, it's about your company presence, and for the use of goods, you can actually do in 3 different types of licenses. It could be part of your franchise agreement with someone who is going to use it. It can be done with corporations, with the small companies, or even individual, but you have to have a official franchise agreement. The second way of doing it is you can actually use your trademark with in similar industry that they are using your product. And I think I'm bringing the example of the Dell computers, where they are using Intel inside, and Intel has its own logo in there. So when you open up, it says Intel. It's in the same industry, and they are sharing the goods and services together as a trademark. The third one is your trademark could be used outside of the industry that you generated. So I think we are trying to say that be very open where your trademark could be used for the licensing. For the copyright, this one is amazing. Actually, look at that, 15th century, and they started with the book printing for the copyright. In those days, if the book was given to the printer, it actually became, the printing company became the author. So they were holding the ownership of the book once it goes to the print house. The English common law is the origination. And by the late 18th century, this copyright came to the US officially as a protection of the intellectual property. We have now much complex copyright because of the open source and other new technologies coming on board. It became much more difficult to protect. You need lawyers or the professional input. But right now with technological innovations, the copyright became more common as well. Especially when it becomes digital technology, like digital photos, digital literature. So the copyright rights are becoming more used and entertained as the licensing and protecting the rights to the IP, to their intellectual property. So copyright protects expression of an idea. Well, we already mentioned that trademark is like a device and your indication of your goods. For the copyright, it's an expression of an idea. So you need to separate when you're not sure as a beginning of your startup, it will be good to seek a legal advice, what type of protection you will need for your company. Is it the patent? Is it the copyright, or it's a trademark? A very good exercise to go at the beginning, because investors will ask you that question. Is it something protectable? And if yes, what are you doing about it? Or have you done anything about that as well? So copyrightable works and non-copyrightable works, I'd like you to get used to these expressions or phrases. Those are fixed recording that your product is protected. So it requires some protection in writing, no matter what type of technologies. Usually they say, if you're planning to do copyright, then it has to be somehow recorded that you are protecting it with the copyright license, and then later on for licensing. There are certain things that cannot be copyright, and we call them non-copyrightable works. And you can see I gave like a very short list, but it's very inclusive. The ideas cannot be copyrighted, procedures, processes, words. So you will words and actually phrases could be trademarked, but not copyrighted. So there is a big difference, and it's important to know how are you protecting that specific intellectual property. Now that we go through monetization, why we think the protection is critical. Later on, we'll go through the litigation processes and what it means to be protected and not protected. So I'll show you some real numbers, what it means. But before we go there, let's talk about what are these big companies, tech and non-tech, doing using the IP. I mean, on this slide, the numbers are extraordinary because first of all, 70 to 80% of the company market capitalization, let's just be specific, market capitalization comes from intangible assets. And it could be intellectual assets, and it includes the patents, the trademarks and copyrights, and of course, other knowledge that could be copyrighted or protected. So if you look at these numbers, I'm going to just bring the Microsoft. You can read the rest. By the way, Simona, I'll share the deck with you, and everybody who is interested, they can actually get a copy of it. So if we take just Microsoft example, they had 800 patents they acquired from AOL for $1 billion. Who would think that you buy patents with such a high number? And not only they bought it, actually it was a transaction. It was a business making or money making machine. They immediately sold 70% of them to Facebook, which means the rest is more valuable and they may sell it later. So the IP is worth the business and it's worth a lot of money and you can actually transact. So when you are planning to protect your IP in some fashion, you can actually think about which part of, you may have 8 patents in your company, which ones you would plan to sell, which ones you would plan to license only, and which ones you will always keep. So look at this picture. They actually keep selling and buying. Motorola did the same thing. Kodak did the same thing to Microsoft, to Apple. So it's a business transaction. It's not only to patent just to be protected, but think about the strategy. What would you do with your intellectual property? It's an asset. It's almost part of your company. It's an entity within your company. What would you do? To give you some perspective also what Fortune 500 companies do, look at the numbers. 2/3 of the US GDP is owned by Fortune 500 companies. So those are your future buyers. They will put money into IP, the ones that they will be interested. If you can see Goldman being non-technical, it's a bank, investment bank, they being non-technical company, they are one of the high investors in tech innovation. And I'm bringing the example that they were one of the early investors in Uber, Spotify, and Ring. So many other non-tech companies are also in this market. So the reason I wanted to put this slide up for you to say that your product is not only for tech companies, in case you're in tech, is not only for healthcare companies if you're in the healthcare space, it's for all of the companies, the target Fortune 500, because they invest in new technologies. And there is an increasing demand by non-tech to invest. As a matter of fact, as of 2017 and 18, the first time the non-tech companies put more money into tech innovation. So think about that. So those are your future buyers or future companies to license your innovation. As I mentioned, IP is not only a legal exercise to go through and protect yourself, it is actually your company growth strategy. Once you identify and evaluate and protect, then the next thing is to think about what is the strategy of revenue generating with your IP. You always, in any strategy meeting you have with your board or with your advisory board or with your team, the IP should be on your list. What do we do with IP? Do we have one? And do we need one? And when we have one, what do we do? So it's a company growth strategy, important component. There is no call that we have, and Armen can attest to it, when investors will ask that question. Did you check if your company product is patentable? Does it have to be protected? And you cannot just say, I'm thinking about it or I don't know. The answer would be, we consulted with the lawyer or the legal teams. They said the following, and we have a written opinion about it. It's protected or not protected. You have to have very solid answer because investors look at your IP as a company growth component and a market making component. So why would you license? I highlighted the 3 ones. There are many reasons to do that. However, generate revenue, foundation for strategic alliances, so you get partners, and definitely then it could be acquired and it could be merged with some other large corporations. And I gave you Fortune 500 companies, all of them as your potential buyers and your potential partners. So if you walk away with just these 3 critical items, like why would you license after you have the IP? Why would you license? For these 3 major reasons. And foundation for strategic alliances also brings you customers. So your customer acquisition plans have to be aligned with your licensing IP conversations. And there are some requirements for all. For patents, trademarks, and copyrights, there is an acquisition requirements. So once you talk about acquisition, license, it's a contract. It's not hearsay, it's not an email, and it's not a phone conversation, and it's not a coffee table discussion or something on the napkin. It's a real legal document. So you have to sign, and you sign every time there is an ownership change, there is a percentage change, there is a enforcement of rights or any dispute. Everything requires legal participation. So don't try to do it yourself. This requires professionals. And as a startup, I would say start building relationship with lawyers at the beginning, not with money to pay because you may not have that money. However, build relationship with legal companies, build relationship with them so they are ready. When you are ready, you actually have people you trust and they kind of understand your business. So you can actually go through this process. Royalty structures, I'll pass very quick here since I'm gonna share the document with you. There are different types of royalty structures. The percentage of sales, so you give some percentage. This is the most common one. Guaranteed minimum, you actually, again, these are all legal documents, and then you put the terms, the term sheet of the royalties. You go for the licenses, guaranteed minimum amount, repeating times, quarterly or yearly or monthly. And of course, there is a flat one-time fee upfront they pay, and then for a year, you don't touch them, or it's a one-time arrangement you made with one of the buyers or interested parties. So royalty structures come with a lot of percentages. I dig deep to actually give you this kind of data. I know it's really hard to find in those very long websites with a lot of legal language. So royalty rates, pay attention. And for the license agreements, look at the number. It can go from 7% to 50%. The difference is depending on what kind of industry you are in. So you can actually go deeper, and this is where your legal advisor will give you exactly where your industry fits or falls in this range when you do the agreements. So if you are in a in pending patent, it cannot be more than 1%, and then issued patent 1 to 2. And then when you go to licensing, again, the range is really large. And then you go with the trademark royalties are going from up to 15%. So those are important things for you to know upfront before you walk into this land of intellectual property protection and the acquisition part of it. For copyrights, it was so varied. Actually, I gave you the link in case you have a copyright product. Go deeper into the copyright royalty board and then see where you fit and how that works for your product. Now let's briefly talk about the 2 scenarios. What happens if you come to US market without patent? And the next slide is actually when you come with patent. First of all, if you come to US market or you go to any other market, anybody can come after you and threaten the competitor from any country can actually threaten you with their lawsuit. So don't think because you came to US, only US can do it. Any country can do it. So what happens if you're not protected? The lawsuit cost can go up to 10 million on legal fees. And then eventually you will, even if the lawsuit is not valid, you still end up paying a lot of money you spend on that, on the legal, because it becomes very complex. What happens if you have patent? The legal fees may not go up than 500K. You may say, wow, that's still big money, but we wanted to show you millions versus only K and maybe none. But the patenting and protection and or copyright and trademark is very important. So know upfront where your product falls and how would you need to protect. Gave you some sources here, like how to find information. Also for European Union, US level, and worldwide IP protection. There are like very different layers. And again, explore which one fits you at this stage and long term. Thank you very much. Here is my contact information. I also have a book about leadership and taking care of your business as an exponential leader, following the new technologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. It was really informative, and I hope every startup founder who is thinking of moving their businesses to US market will find it informative as well. And as you said, you're going to share your slides. So just text us, Simona at startuplithuania.com, and I'll share it with you. Thank you again. And I hope we're going to have some more interactions together, and we can bring more content to Lithuanian startups. Thank you. And for the rest who are still listening, I wanted to just tell that we are preparing a lot of interesting discussions, workshops, and presentations for you in the future. So don't forget to follow Startup Fair Facebook page. And for those who are still thinking, you can still register your startup for Startup Fair Pitch Battle competition happening on 25th of September. So go follow Startup Fair page and you'll find all the information there. Thank you again, Emma and Armen. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here, and have a nice day.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.